In today's video, I'm going to give you 5 players that you absolutely have to draft in order to win your fantasy league this year. Alright, now first up on this list, we have a guy that I've been very big on for a long time, and there are a lot of people that are very high on him this year, and that's Chris Godwin. Now, there is an obvious reason for this, but let's talk about why Chris Godwin has fallen so short up to this point. He did have 131 targets last year. He was averaging about 8, and he was 28th in the NFL in first downs run per route. However, it all comes down to his snap count in the slot. He only ran 293 slot snaps last year. That was about 32%. That's a 30% cut down from what he was at in 2022, where he was number 4 in yards and number 1 in receptions in the slot. And this is a guy, when you look at him, that the stats don't really tell the whole story. You can see there between 2023 and 2022, he has just about the same amount of yards receiving and similar touchdowns. However, in 2022, when he had that many more snap counts in the slot, he had 20 more receptions, which is what led to that, big influx of points that Chris Godwin faced. And when he lost that, you can see what happened when he goes down from 19 to 29. Now, you may be asking yourself, why are we all so hype on Chris Godwin? Now, one of the main reasons is they did hire a new offensive coordinator, Liam Cohen, who did work with the Los Angeles Rams with Cooper Kupp, one of the more bigger physical slot receivers. And we saw how that turned out. Cooper Kupp had, some really great seasons, and if Chris Godwin can have just a little bit that brushed off on him, then he could have a really successful year. Currently, he's being taken at 75 pick. That's toward the mid 7th round, 8th round, a little earlier, depending on how big your draft is. And I don't really think there's any reason for him to be this low. I really see him as much more of a, around the 50s type player. I think he's that good. I think he has the potential to be that good. And, some of the players that I would take Godwin over, Tank Dell and Jalen Reed, who are in some really big offenses that have a lot of mouths to feed. I don't see any reason for both of these players to be ranked ahead of him at the current moment. And I don't see myself ever picking them over Chris Godwin. Now, another guy that I would choose, Chris Godwin over would be Zay Flowers. I think Zay Flowers is in a similar situation. I understand he's the number 1 receiver there. However, in an offense that likes to run the ball a lot more, and adding Derrick Henry, I don't see a reason that I would choose Zay Flowers no matter what over a guy like Chris Godwin, who has the potential to be a league winner. This is somebody that you can go out and you can grab in the 6th, the 7th round and get for, a really, really cheap price. This could be that guy. So I'm choosing Chris Godwin. I'm grabbing as much of him as I can, and I suggest that you do the same. Up next, we have Jaylen Warren from the Pittsburgh Steelers. Now, this is a guy who's going to be splitting the backfield once again with Najee Harris, but that doesn't quite tell the tale. As we know by now, Najee Harris has had his 5th-year option declined, and that leaves more opportunity for not only this year, but next year for Jaylen Warren, depending on how that situation turns out, and there's good reason for that. Jaylen Warren, despite averaging under 50% snap count, was the RB22. He was averaging 4.4 targets per game. That was good enough to be the number 5 running back. Despite all of this, he's still the number 98.1 average draft position on Sleeper. And this is just the beginning of his tale. Last year, number 1 in juke rate. He was number 5 in broken tackles, number 2 in yards after contact per attempt, number 3 in yards created per touch. That means that this guy, despite making contact with defenders, is still elite after the contact has been made, and he fights for that extra yardage. Now, along with this, Najee Harris, not known as a pass catching back. Jaylen Warren, on the other hand, really thrives in that sort of role. He's number 12 in running backs in yards per route run last year, number 5 in targets per route run, which means not only can Jaylen Warren get it done on the ground and be effective, but he has that passing down upside that Najee Harris just doesn't have, which might have been part of the reason why Harris wasn't picked up, and they might be wanting to lean a little more on Warren this year. Now, with this, Warren is going behind guys that I just don't understand. And there's for good reason. As we look at 3 of the guys that I have Warren over, these guys like Austin Eckler, like Javonte Williams, like Jonathan Brooks. Austin Eckler being, on the tail end of his career, he's not looking so great, and especially not fantasy-wise. Javonte Williams had his flashes, but I just don't see him being, explosive as Jalen Warren. And Jonathan Brooks, an unproven rookie that has no business being drafted above this guy. I see Jalen Warren has his opportunity this year. He's proven that when he does have those opportunities, he can really step up. And especially in fantasy, I don't see any reason not to draft him this year. I really think that, especially if Harris, deals with some sort of injury, Jalen Warren could be that running back that wins you the league this year, especially because he's going in that, 9th, 10th round. You can get him for much, much cheaper than what you should be able to, and that could result in you winning your league this year with him. And up next, we have a quarterback who, has proven himself in the past to be a really reliable fantasy quarterback, but this is a guy who's coming off of an ACL tear, who missed the first 9 games of last season, and that is Kyler Murray. Now, Kyler Murray is phenomenal. We all know what we could get out of Kyler Murray. There are some concerns that people have had because of the ACL tear, but Kyler Murray proved last year that he didn't really miss a beat fantasy-wise. He finished as a top 10 points per game in quarterback position last year with just under 19. He has finished in the top 10 in most of his seasons, pretty much all of his full seasons, and he's only improving. He's got a new and improved offense. They added some new offensive linemen in the free agency this year. They added a new wide receiver in Marvin Harrison Jr. and a new additional wide receiver in Zay Jones. They still have their top tight end in Trey McBride and a reliable wide receiver in Greg Dortch. Now, Kyler Murray also has a ton of rushing output, which kind of leads him to be that top 10 running, quarterback position. And when you look at the Cardinals, this is a team who was at some point last year, people were thinking that they were going to be tanking for a quarterback and they were going to release Kyler. Now, Kyler went out and just completely balled out. All of a sudden, Arizona forgot about that entire problem, and they are now all in on Kyler, even getting him again, Marvin Harrison Jr., who should immediately make an impact. I think with all of this, Kyler Murray, and getting him around after draft position of 82, he's going in the 7th to 8th round. He's going number 9, number 10 quarterbacks in a lot of these places, and I think he has the ceiling to be a quarterback 1 and a floor to be quarterback 10. He's in a really good position. He has a lot of upside if you're in draft leagues like best ball. This could be the guy that ends up winning you your league because of all of the upside that he produces. Now, up next, we have a wide receiver that is an often forgot about wide receiver, I feel like, in the fantasy world, and that is going to be Christian Kirk. Now, everybody forgets that in 2022, Christian Kirk had 133 targets, and he was the wide receiver number 11. Last year, he had 85 despite dealing with an injury and averaged 8 targets per game, and that was more than Calvin Ridley. That was the most on the team. In this time period as well, he also led the team in first downs per route run and yards per route run. That's more than Calvin Ridley. Despite missing his time, he still was leading this team. Now, when we think about how the Jaguars' offense has transitioned itself, they have lost Calvin Ridley, and they've added, Gabe Davis and Brian Thomas Jr. But we all know that Christian Kirk has been the favorite target for Lawrence for a while now. I don't see any reason that Brian Thomas Jr. or Gabe Davis, who hasn't averaged, he hasn't even received over 100 targets, and that was from Josh Allen when he was in Buffalo. These are not guys that are immediately going to take these reps away from Christian Kirk. Brian Thomas Jr., he has, a lot of talent. He's a big guy with a lot of athletic ability, but I don't see him pulling any targets or anything away from Christian Kirk at this time being. He's going 64th overall. I believe this is way too low. I have Christian Kirk, low-key in a 4th, 5th round type. I would take him over a lot of receivers, but I'm going to highlight some of the ones that are being taken over him. Again, Tank Dell This is a guy who was again being taken in the 50s. Zay Flowers again being taken in the 50s. Rome Odunze is being taken just before Christian Kirk. I would also probably take him before guys like Amari Cooper, but before guys like Malik Neighbors. I know that one's going to be really questionable because I know a lot of people are really high on Malik Neighbors, but for this upcoming year, I'm really big on Christian Kirk. I really think he has what it takes to be that standout guy and lead your fantasy team to the playoffs and hopefully to a championship. And next, I want to talk about a guy that I feel like is super undervalued coming into this year's fantasy football season, and that's going to be Derrick Henry. Now, Derrick Henry is coming over from the Titans to the number one rushing offense in Baltimore. I want to put a disclaimer that I understand that Derrick Henry has had some injuries over the last 2 years, but he was also on a very, very bad team. They had a horrid offense, rookie quarterback, bad offensive line, and Derrick Henry still found a way to be productive. He led the NFL in carries with 16.5 per game and had over 18 touches per game. I want to point out that he is going to the Ravens offense, who led the league in rushing attempts and ran the ball 52% of the time. Derrick Henry has been top 10 in 4 of the last 5 seasons, and the one season in that 5 that he didn't, he played 8 games and was still 21st in the NFL. Now, Lamar Jackson on this Ravens offense last year had just 5 carries inside the 5-yard line, and this led to 13 Gus Edwards touchdowns. Rip out Gus Edwards, you put in Derrick Henry, who has no competition from any other Ravens running backs. He has Keaton Mitchell, who tore his ACL late last year in around week 14, and there's nobody else that is going to be any competition for Derrick Henry. Derrick Henry is going into a much better offense. I feel like even though he is getting up there in age, he is still going to be very productive for this Ravens offense. I don't feel like there should be any worry, and I think he's being drafted too low. I would still draft him over guys like Josh Jacobs and Devin Achan this year, who are both going a couple of picks over him, especially in Sleeper. I don't see, his value really dwindling all that much. I think he, and especially in leagues like Best Ball, can be that top guy. I still think he has running back 1 potential, or at least running back top 5 potential with all of the yards per carry I feel like he's going to get in this Ravens offense. I think they're going to build around him and allow him to run amok a little more to open lanes for Lamar. So I would definitely go out and I would look to draft him, especially where he's located. If you can get him around his after draft position, I feel like that is an absolute steal. And that's going to be it for this video. If you guys like this video, make sure that you smash that like button and subscribe if you're new here. Comment in the comments section below who you're drafting this year to make sure that you win your fantasy league. Leave me some suggestions on who you think that I should draft this year, and I will catch you guys in the next video. Peace.